This conference will now be recorded.
All right. Hello and welcome to the International Lawyers Network's webinar. The ILN is an association of 91 high-quality, full-service and specialized law firms with over 5,000 lawyers worldwide, of which your firm is a valued member. The network provides clients with easily accessible legal services in 67 countries on 6 continents. Today's webinar is The Future is Now, How Tech is Changing the Delivery of Legal Services for the Mid-Tier. It's a reprise of a panel that we did at our annual conference in Toronto earlier this year, which was extremely well received. And with that, I will pass it over to our moderator, Rick.
Great, thanks, Lindsay. So joining me today is Zena Applebaum, who's the Director of Professional Firm and Corporate Segments with Thomson Reuters in Canada. In her role, Zena is responsible for client feedback and intelligence, market insights, and sales enablement. Prior to joining Thomson Reuters, Zena was the Director of Competitive Intelligence at Bennett Jones LLP, having pioneered the discipline of law firm CI and authoring Business Intelligence for Law Firms, published in November 2012. Zena shares her passion for the industry as a speaker, writer, and contributor to blogs including 3 Geeks and a Law Blog, with topics ranging from competitive intelligence, legal industry change management, qualitative data analysis, and personal branding. A data junkie who revels in the possibilities of data to connect people, places, and things, Zena often can be found connecting the dots between seemingly unrelated data. In 2015, Zena was inducted as a Fellow of the Council of CI Fellows. She has been a session instructor at the University of Toronto iSchool, Rutgers University, and a guest lecturer at law schools across North America. She currently serves on the SLA Board of Directors, and she can be reached at @ZAppleCI or via LinkedIn. Also joining us is Melissa LaFlair, the founder of LaFlair Legal and Project Management Services, which is transforming silos of legal expertise into highly valued, client-oriented legal services. A consultant, lawyer, and certified PMP with over 20 years of experience, Melissa's unique insights into the various challenges and opportunities that present themselves in today's legal market are based on actual experience on each side of the lawyer-client relationship. Melissa's signature approach introduces strategic, data, behavioral, and technology-based perspectives to a range of transformative change efforts that support the differentiation and long-term success of the organization she works with. And finally, Ryan McClead. Ryan is the principal at Sente Advisors, a legal technology consultancy specializing in cross-platform solutions and support. He has been an evangelist, advocate, consultant, and creative thinker in legal technology for more than 15 years. In 2015, he was named a Fast Case 50 recipient, and in 2018, he was elected a Fellow in the College of Law Practice Management. In past lives, he was an innovation architect, knowledge manager, a systems analyst, a fashion merchandiser, maybe he'll tell us about that today, and theater composer, among other things. And I'm Rick Moscone. I'm with Fogler, Rubinoff, one of your ILN partners. So we'll kick it off with Zena first, and then everybody else can chime in. In terms of technology and how it is changing the scope and provision of legal services, maybe you could talk a little bit about what you're seeing nowadays and what's real and what's hype when it comes to technology and law.
Sure, thanks Rick, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Really appreciate you being here. So I think what's interesting when we talk about what's happening in the legal tech space today, it's interesting to think about the fact that in the US, as an example, by 2025, so in about 6 years, 50% of all the lawyers will be millennials, or rather than thinking of them as millennials, think of them as digital natives. These are people who grew up with technology around them. So they're used to all the things that we struggle with. We all struggle to get on this video conference here today, but digital natives don't have that problem. So simply, if you think about the way we communicate, if you think about the way documents are shared, the way people collaborate across communication platforms, if we think about fears around the cloud, those are all things that I don't think the next generation of lawyers really feel the same way that we all would about them. We've come to accept them. We've come to recognize that it's an amazing way for people to get together from across the globe, from different offices in the same city without having to go outside in the rain. But I think one of the things we're seeing in the legal industry is certainly that document automation, intelligent collaborative platforms, these are all things that are taken for granted in today's world, and I think clients are pushing firms to be doing this stuff.
So, Ryan, what are some of the applications that you're seeing most used in this context today?
Well, so I think there's a lot of them. There's a number of different technologies that are becoming much more common. I like to think of what I've been calling the legal innovation hat trick, which is not technologies specifically, not three specific technologies, but three types of technologies. The first being automation tools. Zena mentioned document automation. That's a big one. Workflow automation is a big one. The second being artificial intelligence, which I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more. AI, in this case, defining it more as pattern recognition tools, data extraction tools, possibly prediction tools. And then the third leg of the hat trick is presentation tools. So whether that's collaboration, where you're sharing things with clients, you're working, as we are, you're working in multiple locations simultaneously. You're working with you're doing matter-specific work with other lawyers at other firms as well as with your clients. So I think those are sort of the three big areas that I see at the moment in technology.
Okay. And so, Melissa, I read something recently, and I thought it was a sort of a great concept, and I'd like to get your thoughts on it. It said that there's a new division of labor being created. Lawyers no longer perform many tasks that until recently were regarded as quote unquote legal, and law firms no longer control the delivery of legal services. The days of law firms handling matters from start to finish are over. Consumers now select the appropriate resource and the right provider for the job. Demand for law firms is flat in an expanding market for legal services. Do you think that's a fair sort of summary of what we're talking about, and how do you see that being applied today?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely fair, and what I'm seeing is a disaggregation of services, and a lot of what technology enables lawyers to understand the process that's part of their product. So, traditionally, lawyers focused on everything as bespoke and everything as unique, and they focus on the outcome. And part of what Ryan was referring to and Zena is referring to of using technology and making efficiencies and creating process flows. I often see some of the first work I do with clients is helping them, my clients on both firm and corporate side, is understanding what is the process that's part of the product, and should the lawyers be touching every piece of this process, and whether it's on a smaller individual matter basis or on a larger project, you're dividing up that work to the resources that make the most sense to do the work. A very real example of technology right now, I have a client in Northern Ontario. The firm would never have been able to do the work that we're doing were it not for technology. I have never met them in person. We've done everything over Skype and other forms of technology, and we've gone through process maps because they treated everything traditionally the same way. And by leveraging technology, we're able to eliminate the bottleneck that is the lawyer, because the lawyer does not need to touch every piece of that matter. And the lawyer doesn't need to treat every matter the same way, even if it's within the same type of work. There are subcategories that you can now identify and deal with more efficiently thanks to technology. So there's absolutely a disaggregation, and that it's creating efficiencies, it's creating consistencies, it's creating the ability to budget, which is huge for clients. There are ways. The one thing though is if you use technology to augment what you're doing, or just sort of Band-Aid, slap it on and not change fundamentally how you practice, you're not going to reap the benefits.
So I missed that last piece. Say that again.
So if you fundamentally don't change how you approach your practice, you will not reap the benefits of technology. You can't continue to do what you're doing and just sort of on the side have some technology. I've come across lawyers who have said, oh yeah, we tried that technology, it doesn't work. Well, the technology actually does work. If you haven't changed fundamentally how you go about your practice, you're not going to get the benefits. It's not some silver bullet that magically makes all your problems go away because you've added it to your system. You have to know how to interact. I've said this before, technology to me is like another form of employee. It needs care and feeding, it needs onboarding, you need training of how people work together with the technology. And if you don't learn how to work together with it, it's not going to help you.
It's funny when, if I may, Rick, sorry, when Ryan mentioned the hat trick of legal innovation, I actually thought he was going to talk about people, process, and technology, which is often referred to as the sort of legal tech or any technology hat trick. You can't, technology, you still need to have workflows, you still need to have process, and you still need to have people at the back end of those processes. So just because you implement a technology, or rather, because you purchase a technology, doesn't mean it's been adopted, doesn't mean your workflows have changed. And you do hear this all the time from clients or firms where they say, oh, we bought a DMS, nobody's using it, or we bought a CRM system and nobody's using it. You can't just buy something and expect that everybody's using it. The same way many of us will buy or have, like I have my phone, I can maybe use a third of the features that are here, and I'll pick it up and use it one way. My kids will pick it up and use it a different way. My husband will pick it up and use it a different way, and then they get mad at me that I don't use it the way they use it. But we all use our technology in the way that our workflows allow us to be most efficient. And sometimes we need to be shown other ways to do that and add that into our workflows. You talk about disrupting technology. I recently was in a Canadian city that doesn't have Uber. And the amount of frustration I felt, and I felt, violated, that I had to sit and wait for a taxi, that I couldn't just pick up my phone and order one and it was there. And I was angry. And I was like, oh my God, like, you need to relax. But, we adopt certain technologies in certain ways, and then when they're gone, we miss them. I don't think we've gotten to that point with all legal tech. There are certainly some that firms can't live without, but I don't think we've gotten there with all of the actual hat trick that Ryan spoke about.
Well, and so I completely agree. People, process, and technology. That is, but I was specifically speaking of technologies. So just on the technology side, those three. The other I want to point out, and I think it's going to sound like I'm disagreeing with Zena, but I'm not. I think we're actually in agreement. But the first thing Zena said about millennials and them coming in, being a majority of the lawyers. Yes, they are digital natives. Yes, they do use technology differently, as Zena just pointed out. But that doesn't mean they automatically know how to do this stuff, right? They know social media because they've been using it forever. They might know the apps on their phone. They don't necessarily know workflow software. They don't know artificial intelligence. They don't know how to build things for clients, right? So just because they're digital natives doesn't mean they inherently understand all technology. You can't just go get a bunch of digital natives and let them loose and they'll figure out how your law firm should work, right? But I do think recognizing that they use technology differently and they think about it differently will actually help you as you begin to implement this technology.
Well, and to that point, they don't use the technology that we dinosaurs use. So email is a foreign concept, right?
Well, and they might struggle with this go-to-meeting, right? But if it was FaceTime, or if it was why would you do it this way? There's got to be an easier way to do this.
I think they have a fundamentally less fear of technology and less trepidation using it. So I fully agree that they don't understand how firms work and processes in firms, or how matters, or how technology for process mapping, etc. But they're happy to mess around, and they don't have the same fear of failure and of hitting the wrong button and losing something forever.
Yep.
So, I think this is really a conversation about cultural and generational issues as well. So, going back to the comment that both Zena and Melissa, you were making in terms of technology only works if you use it, and ultimately, you see offices that try to go from sort of 0 to 10 and bring. And so are there things that, law firms, especially sort of mid-sized law firms, as most ILN members are, where they may not necessarily have the same budget that a larger law firm would have to sort of just bring in technologies, we'll figure out what works, and you're sort of really thinking about what you're bringing in. Is there a process that you should be going through in terms of integrating this stuff? So, for example, people talk about like, we want to go to a paperless office, right? So doing something like that makes sense before you go to the next step, because now I'm learning how I don't need to have all these papers around me and integrate with the technology in a different way.
I think the paperless office is a myth. First of all, I've never seen a paperless office. Even those that claim to be paperless are not paperless. They use a lot of paper. In terms of how to go about this, I don't think there's one way. There's no single path to follow. For me, the key is, and this is kind of what we do now. So I was, when we did the original panel, I was working at Neotologic, which is an AI company. Now I run my own consulting firm. And what we do is we work with law firms and law departments to do innovation. And one of the key things that I focus on is start with the problem, right? You're not looking to get to some mythical paperless office or some, you don't want to reach an ideal. You want to solve the problems you have. So identify the problem you have, first of all, and then let's look at process, right? Let's look at the people that are doing it. And then once we've got that sort of figured out, now let's look, what are the technologies that can be applied to begin to make this a better solution for us. At the end of that, having done that multiple times with multiple problems, you end up at that mythical place that is a well-functioning law firm using technology to its benefit. But you don't start out to just go down that path. You look to solve actual problems.
So, go ahead, Melissa.
I was going to say, just to layer on that, it isn't always a problem that has to be solved. Sometimes it's an opportunity to capitalize on. And I think as long as everything is grounded and founded on what's in the best interest of your clients, because clients are very tech savvy. They're they're used to in their daily lives convenience of, as Zena's saying, Uber, or the ease of a iPhone, or having all these apps. So when they then run into the prehistoric operations of law firms, it's a complete disconnect for them. They can't understand why it can be so difficult to get copies of documents, or why it's so hard to get things signed, or why you have to, paperless, and I agree with Ryan, isn't necessarily paperless, it's often paper reduced. But there's a ton of stuff that can be done technologically that makes it easier for clients to get the services and advice that you're offering. And I think that's where, everything from sharing of information so that you're not reinventing the wheel and charging more than you need to for services. It's really, from the work that I do, I see it's really based in convenience for clients, because the easier it is for clients to interact with a firm, the happier the clients are going to be, because clients, they don't really know how to assess the legal advice. That's why they're coming to the lawyer. The lawyer is the specialist. What clients know how to assess is what was the experience and process like dealing with that lawyer, whether it's an individual lawyer or a firm. So from the client's perspective, it's the experience. And that's where I focus a lot of my work, is understanding what's the impact, and then helping firms understand, if we improve this experience, is that going to make a meaningful difference? Do we have data to show that that's an area that's of interest to the clients? Because not everything's worth improving. Improving for the sake of improvement. Going back to Ryan's comment, is there a problem or an opportunity, and are the benefits of addressing that worth the effort? Because it takes effort to bring in technology.
So a couple of things I want to add to that. in terms of very tangible opportunities or tangible problems that mid-sized firms might be looking to solve, something like implementing DocuSign. You know, it's a really relatively straightforward, relatively cost-efficient technology that allows for electronic signatures, so that you're not passing documents back and forth, actually getting somebody to put a wet signature on it, you know, then scanning it, PDFing it, sending it over to whomever. DocuSign allows you. It's a very simple technology, but it solves that problem of time and time zones and people in different places. Another one that I hear a lot from firms of all sizes, but particularly in the mid-tier, document management systems. Whatever it is you use, but a way to each know what you all know, to use what is in your firm as a collection of documents that are all tagged similarly. And this is where you could use like a Sente advisors or somebody to help you set that up, to understand what data might we want to collect at some point in the future to help our firm be more efficient. But right now we just need a document management system so we can save things the same way. So that if somebody, you know, wins the lottery tomorrow and takes off, we have a succession plan in place because we know what documents they've been working on. And that's one of the things where people tend to keep their own documents in their own folders and not share. So if you're missing a document management system, again, it's a really easy way. You may not know that you're missing it, so you may not know that you need it. And I think that's a lot of technology is that way until you start to use it or start to see it. But it's definitely one way to increase efficiency really, really easily. The other thing I would add, again, particularly for mid-tier firms, and this is changing tactics a little bit, is don't get caught up in the rhetoric of large law firms all saying that they are innovative, that they have all of this stuff figured out. A gentleman by the name of Casey Flaherty, some of you may be familiar with or may have read some of his work. He has a great piece on marketing, and I'll leave it at that. But on how firms market their innovation and whether or not what's put out into the market is actually what's happening behind the doors at the firms. So you may feel this anxiety and this angst to get ahead and be like the big boys and or big girls for that matter, and have all this technology in place and have all these efficiency tools in place so that you are automating and doing predictive analytics and you know, have lawyers as coders, but just back to basics. Figure out what your problems are. Figure out ways to solve them. Get somebody in to help you understand what your biggest challenge is, and then figure out the best way to solve it.
And just to build a little bit on that, I think consistency in application is really critical, because I literally have had a couple of clients who they brought me in to help them. They're on the business side to help them with their firm. They were large firms. It turns out the firms offered the stuff that I was hired to help with, but the firms didn't offer it to the clients until the client said I was involved. And suddenly, stuff that was available that people hadn't been using. So there's, you know, firms do have pockets of expertise, but the bigger the firm, the harder it is to have it consistently applied. And that's where clients, they want consistency. They want to know if something's available at the firm, they're getting the benefit of it, and it's not hidden and only available if they ask for it.
So I just want to, and we touched on this before, but I just want to revisit it again, because, you know, you were talking about the document management system, and you know, that's for me sort of a live issue now, because we're actually, I think, in the process of we don't have a document management system, but we're, like, we have, as you say, just sort of a system where you put documents in folders, etc. But we had made this shift about, I think, 2 years ago. We created sort of a new a new drive for documents to be saved, because the old one had was at capacity. But in the new one, the idea was it was locked down. So it was almost kind of like a quasi sort of document management system. So as opposed to people storing things in their own folders, you'd be sort of forced to sort of save them within client stuff and all that. So it's a more sort of like middle ground between going to a document management system, which we're now going to do very soon. But the interesting thing is that I would say still more than half the firm doesn't use this new lockdown drive that we've created, and they're still using their old, you know, folders, etc. So going back to the question I was asking before, which is, like, you spend a lot of money on this, and there's probably no bigger investment you're going to make from a technology standpoint than a document management system. How do you ensure that once you have this in, that people, like, are there sort of good practical tips to sort of make sure that people buy into this stuff? Like, is it a function of getting, as you say, the millennials who are more comfortable with this, really get them to buy into it and show maybe other people who aren't comfortable with how to use it, et cetera? Is that, so I'm just sort of throwing that out there in terms of how do you make use of it?
So there's a couple of different things. One, use your non-lawyers in your firms. Use what I like to call your, Ryan's left us. Use what I like to call your allied professionals in your firms. So your paralegals, your marketing people, your business development, librarian, and knowledge management folks. Use them to help set up governance around document storage. Use them to help create, particularly your legal assistants, a document saving convention, and incentivize them to make sure that all of their documents and documents that they're working on behalf of lawyers are put into the system. And then, you know, at some point, we're going to have to talk about the carrot and the stick. You do have to get lawyers recognizing it's a business. And when one client says, I want to see a succession plan, part of that succession plan is that the documents are shared across the firm. And so if lawyers are not using the system to share their documents, then, you know, there's a chain in that succession plan, or there's a break in that chain of succession plan. And so you really have to think about it as a business issue, not a workflow, this is how I like to work issue. But if all the documents related to a particular matter, related to a particular file, are not in one place, then aside from the, you know, potential liability issues if that calls into play, or if there's a breach or something like that, there's also just, you know, client succession. And I saw, before I left my last firm, I saw in an RFP, clients were asking what our succession plan was for that client and how we would ensure that they would have consistent service over 5 years, over the next 5 years. And one of the answers is a document management system. So both the firm and the client know that everything related to them is in one place. So, you know, it's understanding what makes your lawyers tick and how you can incentivize them.
Yeah, I think that's the behavioral element, because I think people try and treat everyone the same way. And one of the things that draws lawyers to law is that they're able to be individuals. So we're fundamentally asking people to change what they've enjoyed doing for years and years. And so that's part of the design of a DMS and part of the design of the saving protocols, and is understanding how are you going to make this the easiest to use for the greatest number of people. No system is perfect, and lawyers like having things that cover every possible eventuality. A system is based to work like 80% of the time, and then you know that you are able to identify when something's different and how you deal with that different, and you deal with that separately. But you know, then that's one of the things with the sort of the data digging that I do, is understanding who are the biggest culprits, and you get access of where's the bulk of the non-compliant people and the non-compliant files, and then talk to them and find out why they're not using it, because sometimes it's really basic misunderstanding of how technology works. And so there is a lot of hand-holding, and so that's what, you know, allied professionals and people like Ryan and myself, we come and we help you work through that growing pain and that transition period.
And don't underestimate lawyers not wanting to ask for help. And often the documents are not stored where they should be stored or how they should be stored, simply because they don't know how to do it and they don't want to ask for help. And that's really where your legal assistants and things like that can come into help.
Do you think, I think the term business came up quite a few times there in that last part, and do you think that there's fundamentally, notwithstanding that we talk about it like it's an important thing, do you think a lot of lawyers still don't view business, technology, and law as being sort of all critical to what they do, and sort of just look at it as, I'm a legal expert and that's really all that matters, and I don't need to worry about these other things? Is that still a barrier that needs to be broken?
I think so, and I think, you know, we still encourage associates to get to a certain point before they're thinking about the business. I think law schools are very slow, with a few exceptions, are very slow to talk about the business of law and are still really focused on the practice of law. And we don't really have a lot of business acumen courses in law school still, at least across North America. I mean, Vanderbilt does something, Ryerson's University that's proposed to be here in Canada does something. But there's Suffolk, obviously, University, but there's very few law schools that are teaching it. And so associates aren't coming out recognizing that these are things they need to be thinking about. And it's a very slow animal to change. I mean, you're talking about a profession that's been around for hundreds of years, and you're trying to change the very nature of how the work gets done, not necessarily what work is being done. So the practice of law is still going to be fundamental, and I think lawyers still need to focus on that because they are trained to do that. And all this ancillary stuff is creeping up in its importance, but I think the idea is that it should be become second nature to the way you practice.
And I just to add to that, I think it's a trickle-down effect because what you're seeing in-house is a fundamental change in how the businesses are interacting with their in-house counsel, which then trickles down to how in-house or businesses without in-house interact with their external counsel. And the ability to be a silo of legal excellence and just do your legal work and have it sit in isolation it's gone. You need to be integrated. As you see the development of the T-shaped and plus-shaped lawyers, and you need to have those skills. And those skills are, include technological savvy, understanding, business, understanding the client's needs. And I have seen in my work, lawyers don't know what they don't know. And if they haven't worked with business, how are they supposed to understand this context? And so I've been developing this engagement now, a client engagement platform that specifically helps clients and lawyers see whether they have shared perspectives or a gap in perspectives and understanding, how relevant is that advice that's being generated to the need that the client wants to have go away. And that's where, going back to Ryan's earlier point of the problem, a significant problem in the legal profession is lawyers not understanding the client context and clients not understanding how to explain it. Clients work in a world of numbers and lawyers work in a world of words. So you're trying to figure out how to get those two worlds to intersect in a way that is efficient and effective and valuable.
So Ryan, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, on that question with the importance of business and technology, I think it's also important to point out that the lawyers don't have to be the best business people and the best technologists. They need to know enough to hire the right people and let them do their jobs, right? You don't have to do, not every job in a law firm has to be by a lawyer. You can hire good technologists and good business people, and they can make you a better law firm and a better legal business.
And so, going to Zena's point about the fact that, law schools really don't, for the most part still today, focus on this stuff. But thinking that you want to, if you really are focused on thinking that, okay, our young people are going to be the ones who kind of become the evangelists for this stuff, but they themselves are coming into the firms thinking, I just got to be this really great lawyer and I'm going to sort of block the rest of it out. I mean, is there a strategy around trying to sort of, ingrain this stuff very early on about business and technology, having internal sessions that sort of talk about it and really focus on those young people who you hope to sort of carry the torch, so to speak?
The firms that, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
The firms that I've seen that do that best, and Melissa mentioned it's top down. It's the firms that have the leadership that are pushing their younger associates to be aware of these things. But most importantly, it's not just awareness. If you are pushing them to understand technology, to be a part of the business, and yet you're not giving them the freedom and the time to do that, then they're not going to do that. They're only going to focus on getting their hours and doing the practice of law. So you need to figure out compensation for younger associates that can give them the time or the credit for the time that they spend working with technology or business of law or process improvements or whatever it might be.
We're back to the carrot and the stick. It's always about
It is. There's a lot of carrots and sticks involved. Yes.
I think it's in every profession.
Yeah.
Like, I think, you know, lawyers are just coming to it at a different period in time, but I think every profession has had their carrots and their sticks.
Right. So we were talking about artificial intelligence earlier, or I think Ryan, you touched on it, and obviously it's the big buzzword nowadays. Just this morning I was reading an article talking about how if for young people who are not from the law side but from the software side or whatever, people who are skilled in AI command six-figure salaries day one, et cetera. So I mean, it's obviously such a big focus right now, and it's going to change every profession. But when we're talking about law today, are we really talking about true artificial intelligence, or are we talking about really just sort of simplistic uses for artificial intelligence that will continue to get more intelligent? And what does that mean for today as a law firm? How should you be using quote unquote artificial intelligence in your practice?
So AI, when we talk about AI, there's two completely different types of artificial intelligence. First of all, general artificial intelligence, which is what you think of in the movies. This is a brain in the box kind of thing. It does not exist, and likely will not exist for a very long time. All of the technology that we're talking about is known as weak artificial intelligence, narrow artificial intelligence, and that includes really complex things like self-driving automobiles. They're still narrow artificial intelligence. What you're using in a legal context is narrow artificial intelligence that really breaks down, depending on how you want to break it down. There are a lot of different categories. Law Geeks has a great graphic that I like to show that shows all of the different vendors and the different types of things they do. But even taking that into account, all artificial intelligence that's currently used in the legal environment breaks down into essentially pattern recognition or prediction of some kind. And prediction is just another type of pattern recognition, right? So it's looking at large sets of data and identifying, I think this is X because it's got patterns of data going back months or years or whatever it might be. Or with prediction, based on what we've seen in the past, we think it's likely that this is going to happen with this jurisdiction and this presiding judge and this type of matter. So it's about those two things, all AI technology in a legal environment right now.
So and obviously the thing that a lot of lawyers become concerned about is, as I sort of integrate these types of technologies, in particular when you start talking about artificial intelligence, wherever it sits on the spectrum, does that mean they're not going to need me anymore, right? Like, and so maybe that's the concern where people are, I don't really want to integrate these technologies because that just eliminates my job. Is that a real concern?
No. Well, it's sort of like saying, I don't want to use Microsoft Word because my experience was in writing contracts out by hand. No, that's ridiculous. This is technology, right? It makes you more efficient, makes you better. I can't imagine anybody wants to go back to writing out contracts by hand. AI is just another technology. It's just another tool, and it will make you better at some things. It will distract you from some things. All of the positives and negatives of technology apply to AI.
And it's been around for a really long time. It's just that we're starting to hear more about it, and it's becoming more de rigueur today, but it's been around forever. I mean, not forever, but it's been around for a very long time. So if you want to think about Westlaw, which is Thomson Reuters' primary research platform, it's had what would be considered artificial intelligence built into it since the 90s, where it filled in what you thought you were researching for you. That's a way of predictive, right? That's a part of natural language processing, which is a part of the predictive category that Ryan was talking about. So these things have been around for a very long time. We're just getting better at it. We're getting smarter at it. It's becoming less expensive, although some of it is still very expensive. And as a result, it's not yet accessible, like self-driving cars and things like that. And we haven't worked out all the kinks. So it's a continued evolution. The same with, you wouldn't go back to handwriting contracts. How many firms would go back to not using e-discovery, right? When you're plowing through hundreds and thousands, potentially even hundreds of thousands of documents on a litigation file. Sorry?
Or email.
Or email, right. Like you wouldn't go back to the banker's boxes of books or banker boxes of paper and staying up till 4 o'clock in the morning every morning for 3 weeks to get to the trial when you have e-discovery tools that can do this for you in a portion of the time. You still need people on the back end. There's always going to be that human element. I'm surprised Ryan didn't talk about augmented intelligence rather than artificial intelligence. We're replicating what the human brain can do faster, but there are elements of the human brain that technology will never be able to replicate. And so that's where the creative thinking comes in. That's where the bespoke work that lawyers do comes in. And I don't think that will ever go away. In fact, lawyering is still one of the top 10 most, one of the top 10 most exciting careers to go into, because artificial intelligence is only making it better, not taking away from it.
What it takes away from is you no longer have to have some junior, which I have done myself, sit with your dictaphone with banker's boxes of leases trying to find the change of control provision. Like, horrible.
Even tapes versus digitals, right? Like,
so, you did that, and then you filled out your summaries, and someone still has to review those summaries. Someone still has to interpret them and whether there's a problem. But that very menial, time-consuming task is now being done by technology. You still need to interpret it, but you now have, instead of losing associates who, after 3 months of sitting in boardrooms going through boxes say, I hate this, I quit, they're not going to now. They're going to learn instead how to interpret and apply it and stay with the practice of law.
And that's where our earlier comments around digital natives come in. Digital natives will sit in a room doing this work and say, there's got to be a better way. Technology should make this easier. And that's where you get your Shelby Austins of the world who have said, there is got to be a better way, and they went out and built it, right? So the technology is there to the point where people recognize there are better ways to do things, and they can go home and tinker with free software and figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah, is it really as simple as sometimes thinking about, because exactly with what everyone was just saying, if you take your mind back to those 20 or 30 years ago when you were doing things in those manners, ultimately there's no way that you could do the level of work that you do today in that type of environment. And so clearly you're able to just, do much more work today than you could. And ultimately, as long as you have that work today, you're happy, right? Because you don't have to worry about, looking for the change of control provision, whatever, because I have this other high quality work. And so it doesn't really just become a game of, maybe you're concerned, I need to, latch on to this work because maybe I won't have that other work. But the reality is maybe you also won't have this work if that client decides that you're just not efficient enough. So you kind of have to move that direction to keep even the work that you have today.
Absolutely. Clients are becoming far more sophisticated and far more demanding because they're seeing it in all other areas of their lives. And so they're asking for it, sometimes not as loudly, but they're getting louder in legal. And clients are not static. They are not immune to this change. There is a fire hose of information being dumped on businesses and change the businesses are pivoting and reacting and adapting to. So law, in order to continue to keep those clients happy, law has to adapt as well.
And we're talking again about the business of law. Remember that the practice of law will continue to evolve as humanity continues to evolve. So things like some of the lawyering tasks we're talking about will go away, but there are new areas of law that are constantly emerging as a result of this technology that still need to be lawyered. Reproductive rights, artificial intelligence. What is it? Today is the 15th, so in 2 days, marijuana is legal in this country. There are constant evolutions happening in the world that still require legal expertise, and that's only intensifying. So while the nature of your work and your daily tasks may be changing, the need for lawyers is ever increasing, and the need for laws to be written around in every jurisdiction around all kinds of new issues is constantly evolving too. So don't think of it as a sum total game. Just because e-discovery has taken away your ability or your desire to sit through files doesn't mean there's not another opportunity coming up somewhere else that needs your attention.
So one of the things that I observe is that it seems to me that in-house departments are getting bigger, and it's probably around some of these issues that we're talking about in terms of companies trying to bring some of these costs in-house and not engaging outside counsel as much. Do you find that even from that perspective, that maybe even I don't know to the extent the three of you whether you work with in-house counsel a lot, but do you find that even it kind of they're just kind of moving the chess pieces around, but maybe even internally they're not that efficient either from a technology standpoint, and they're just looking for how am I going to reduce my outside counsel expense as much as possible?
Well, I do a fair bit of work with in-house teams, and I think what's happening is they don't look at it as internal, external spend. What is and how can I get the same outcomes without more legal departments are being told no more money. So figure out how to do it with an ever-increasing volume of work with no more money. So they're not efficient, and they can't just send it to external counsel. So that it's not necessarily reducing the spend. It's usually figuring out how to do more work without increasing spend. And so they look at, well, how are we getting work done now, and are the right resources doing the right work? And so there's a realignment going on, and there's a bringing in processes and technologies in-house. And once they get the in-house in order, and that sort of balancing and alignment right, they will then look to the firms to say, now do it yourself to what you're doing, make it better.
Yeah, I mean, I work a fair bit with outside counsel as well, or with corporate counsel, and I mean, honestly, just think of them as small firms. They're small firms with one client rather than a myriad of clients. So you have sole practitioners working, as a sole GC or a sole corporate counsel in a firm. They have very similar challenges to a smaller solo law firm, where they don't have the spend, they don't have the budget, but they still have to do what they want to do. Look at the big banks. In any country, they have law departments that run potentially even some of the marriage firms. They do all of the same issues. They just have one client or one client base that they're drawing from, as opposed to having to go out and hunt and gather for their work on an ongoing basis. So that's really the only difference in terms of how they organize, in terms of the issues around technology, around efficiency, AI, or the hat trick that Ryan spoke about earlier. They're dealing with all the same issues.
And it actually isn't even depending on the organization, because there are multiple departments with different needs. So it's like maybe one captive audience, one business category, but there are subcategories and subclients within that they are absolutely, figuring out how to accommodate and address and prioritize.
So Ryan, if somebody's watching this today and they have very little in what we would consider sort of today's technology involved in their practice and their firms, etc., what would you say would be the one or two things that they should sort of begin to work on tomorrow as they try to become a more technology savvy law firm?
Well, again, I would not go for technology straight away. I would work on process. I would work on, do you have you identified opportunities for innovation in your firm? I just ran a workshop for a large New York law firm that was teaching their practice support lawyers to identify opportunities. So, I had a list of about 10 things that were common when you see little inefficiencies in the way that you work. If somebody's sending around emails to say, hey, does anybody know, whatever, that's a great indication there's something there, right? There might be a technology solution, but you need to talk about, why are we sending these around? Who is usually answering these, right? What is the way this should work? And then once we figure that out, now let's look at the market. Are there technologies that can do this? Can we get a consultant in to help us figure out technology to do this? But the key is, don't start with the technology. Don't go out looking. It's fine to go look at vendors and technologies that are out there, but don't go seeking simply to see what's out there so you can see if you can bring something in. Really understand your practice, and if you have issues with it, or if there are opportunities there to make your practice better.
It's a great example. It's pretty innocuous, but when again, at my former firm, our digital marketer took some time. He got frustrated by the number of emails that went across the entire firm that said, does anybody know this? This book is missing from the library. Has anybody seen it?
In other law firms?
Sorry?
I said that happens in other law firms?
Yeah, oh yeah. This amount of money into our account, does it belong to you? It didn't come from money. And he added up the number of these emails that he got on a particular day, multiplied it by the number of days he was at the office, multiplied it by the number of minutes it took him to even read and delete those emails. And he didn't bill for his time. So he said, imagine all the people in our office who are spending as much time as I've just spent and are actually billing for this. Is there a better way? And that's it's a great example of something that's seemingly innocuous, but it takes away from your efficiency. And when time is money, as it is in law firms, regardless of where you sit on the billable hour being dead continuum, that's a great problem to try to figure out ways around.
Is the billable hour dead?
Do we have another hour?
Depends, how much is it going to cost?
Yeah, exactly. I don't even know. Can we accept questions on this or no? Do we know? This is me being technology unsavvy.
I think
You can. Yep. I definitely put in the chat box that if anybody had any questions, they can ask those in the questions.
Okay.
And I will ask some of you guys. We have not had any yet.
Okay, great. Yeah. Okay, I didn't know that. Okay.
I won't answer whether the billable hour is dead. I will talk about Susskind's The End of Lawyer, and I will say there's two in the room right now, so lawyers aren't end. It's a viable career, and it's a great career. I think it's actually a great time to be in legal. I think there's tons of amazing things happening, whether it's on the business side or the practice side, and it's just getting more interesting and more creative.
Right. And do you think, I guess to sort of bring it all together, because I think you made the comment earlier, Zena, that like a lot of, whether large or small law firms will refer to themselves as innovative or, whatever terms they want to use. Is it something that, as firms spend money on this, so, they probably start thinking about, well, how can we sort of, capitalize this on some way in terms of marketing us as this way or that way? Is it something that you should really be sort of publicizing in some way? Or is it really just sort of table stakes today, and really you should be sort of more on the ground, making people understand what you can do for them as a result of all this?
So I think from a marketing perspective, unless you're actually doing something innovative, don't say you're doing something innovative. All it does is actually detracts from your brand, if you even have a brand in the market. And whether or not firms have brands in the market is something we can talk about another time for an hour. But what I would say is focus on client service. If you're getting these things up and running, whether you're in-house counsel or you're in a firm, focus on your client service. Create opportunities to share knowledge with clients and to do case studies with clients about how using this technology saved you time or saved you money or increased the quality of your service, and use those testimonials to drive more business rather than looking for the easy marketing. Hey, we bought Cura Systems. Great. What are you doing with it? Don't just issue a press release that you bought a great piece of technology that doesn't do anything.
It's sitting on the shelf.
Right.
We talked about email a couple of times, and obviously there's other solutions that are sort of coming to market that claim to sort of replace email. I mean, from what you guys are seeing today, do you still think, 5, 10 years down the road, we'll be using email the way that we use it, or will one of these other solutions sort of supplant it? And if so, is that something that a law firm should even be thinking about, or just stick to email today because that's what everybody else is using?
Well, go ahead, Melissa.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think email isn't it's just a form. It's communication is never going to go away. So it's going to be, what is the most efficient form of communication? In Elizabethan times, they used to have the postal service 3 times a day. People would send a letter and they'd say, "You want to come for tea today? Okay, what time? Well, okay, see you then." Like communication, the fundamental need to communicate. The post being delivered 3 times a day has certainly changed, but communication hasn't. And so I think what you're going to see, and I know people now who are drowning in email because they don't know how to manage it. And so people coming up with protocols of what to share when with who is, figuring out how to effectively communicate will be a constant, because as the various modes and means of communication change, our ways of managing them will have to change. And you look at LawPro, the vast majority of claims against lawyers are due to communication issues. So it's not communication. So email communication is not going anywhere. It's just going to get more and more. How we deal with it, I would be very surprised if email as we know it today is the same form of communication that's the standard and the most common 10 years from now. But the communication and management of information isn't going anywhere. It's getting better.
I completely agree with that. I was going to say that I think the communication is obviously paramount in a law firm. That's going to continue. I think the email will probably be less prevalent. We've become sort of monolithic with our communication in law firms. Back to bring it all the way back to the digital natives, they don't use email. They use social media. They communicate in different ways to different people based on the context of the communication. And I think that's what we'll see. The context of the communication will dictate what the media is that you're using.
And we're starting to see that in the courts already. And I was going to say, back to the earlier comment too about governance, like we don't know the laws and the rules necessarily around text and text messages and how those are being governed. But we have started to see in the courts subpoenas being issued over Facebook and it being allowed. We're starting to see social media really having an impact in the way, not just how people communicate, but how law is practiced. And I think, to Ryan's point, that will just continue.
Excellent. Okay, well, I think we've come to the end of the hour. Hey, Lindsay, welcome back.
Yeah, thank you so much. This was really a wonderful, wonderful session. I really appreciate it. I want to thank everybody. The session will be recorded and I will be distributing that to everyone following this. So if anybody has any questions that they didn't get a chance to answer, hopefully you'll get a chance to reach out to our wonderful panelists and ask those to them. And I'll also provide everybody's contact information again. So if you want to reach out to them directly, you have the opportunity to do that as well. So thank you again, guys. This was really a stellar session. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
See you later.
All right. Bye.
Bye.